I eventually recorded a woman who was in a film store buying film. She was not an actress, but I heard her voice at the counter saying something about her credit card. I'd like my MasterCard, please, something like that. And I said to myself, oh, that's an alien voice, that's E.T. I was very surprised when I received the news I was getting an award, because normally at festivals, you're honoring those craftsmen and artists that are above the line, the directors, the writers, the producers, but I'm below the line that's in the credits. And I was being pulled up into this new realm with an honor. So I was surprised at first. I mean, I thought it was wonderful. And I wondered whether at first, are they sure it's me? Okay, but then I understood. And it's a great honor, of course, to have my work and my editorial and sound work to be recognized. In normal production of feature film, sound often is a set of work that comes toward the end of the filmmaking. And you cram together very quickly a soundtrack. It takes a lot of skill to do it quickly. It's not often something that's extended from the very beginning. But the vision that George Lucas had and the habit that I developed was to begin working on a film very early on, when there was just a script, even before filming would take place. And that's what was proposed when I worked on the very first Star Wars movie, that I would have time and resources to collect, develop, and experiment with sound, so that all through the process there could be a reference to it. In the actors on the set might know what the creature's going to sound like. The editors, as they would first assemble scenes, I could put in temporary sound that allows one to judge the scene better. So the idea was in sound design, as George Lucas saw it, that it'd be part of the extended process of making a movie. Steven Spielberg was the other major director that I worked with in my career. He and I are about somewhat the same age, had grown up loving the same kinds of movies, so we had a good dialogue between us when we discussed what type of sound was needed to be designed for his films. The first film I worked on with him was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and subsequently through the rest of the first trilogy of Indiana Jones films. E.T. was an interesting development because Spielberg wanted to develop the voice of E.T. itself. And we were auditioning different actors and actresses to see if someone could impersonate or create a voice that sounded like an alien being. And I was given the task of experimenting to look for a voice. And I had, from my work on Star Wars, I had been successful in creating alien voices by using elderly women who had a deep voice, because their voices were somewhat genderless. You know, the audience is very aware of any kind of dialogue, and they can analyze whether it's a person imitating a sound. They can see through the trick. So it was important to find a way to fool them. And I found one way with the Ewoks, for instance, was to record elderly women and then pitch shift their voices a little bit, and they became good alien voices. So we were looking for someone who might have that kind of voice. And what Spielberg let me do was develop it without his knowledge of what was going on. He didn't want to know how I was producing the sounds. He just would send me a scene, a temporary cut of a scene. I would put experimental sounds into it and send it back. And he could see it in the context of being in the audience, not being analyzed, not analyzing it. And that's the way we worked throughout that whole process. I eventually recorded a woman who was in a film store buying film. She was not an actress, but I heard her voice at the counter saying something about her credit card. I'd like my MasterCard, please, something like that. And I said to myself, oh, that's an alien voice, that's E.T. So when she finished her transaction, I waited outside on the sidewalk, and I came up to her and I said, would you like to be an alien in a motion picture? And she was, I think she thought about it for a moment and said, well, maybe, that kind of thing. And I arranged for her to come to my recording studio the next day to do some tests. And that's how it began, using her to produce the English words in the film, like phone home, that sort of thing. The Wilhelm scream was a sound joke which started in film school between myself and another student friend named Richard Anderson. I had recognized the scream used in many old movies. It was in the Warner Brothers library, and they used it over and over and over again in westerns and horror pictures in the 1950s and 60s. And I knew about it because I used to record all those movies off television, and I just remembered all the sounds. And so I put it in our student film, a copy of it, just as a joke. And then later, on the very first Star Wars movie, I put it in Star Wars for a stormtrooper falling from a high place during a gun battle. And Richard and I started putting it in every film we worked on. We worked on Raiders together. There's a half a dozen Wilhelms in that. And he would put it in films in LA and then call me up and tell me he did it, and I'd have to listen and find out where he hid it. And it was just a joke between us for 25 years. No one said anything about it. No one recognized that it was a private joke until the internet came along, and of course, and DVDs, tapes, and people could then study movies, and the fans of those movies began to recognize there was this one repeating sound effect. It was a little embarrassing to me at first. I remember George Lucas came to me and said, Ben, are we using this certain scream over and over again? Is that true? And I said, I'm going to get fired. Yes, George, we're using this scream over and over again. And he goes, oh, okay. And he walks away. So that's approval, I guess, in that world. And so eventually a copy escaped. It got into the Lord of the Rings movies. It got on television. It showed up everywhere. It propagated throughout the entire post-production global sphere of sound editors. And that's where it lies today. So it's a slightly embarrassing in-joke that got released to the world.